Welcome back to BlackJupiter. I'm Agent Random, and tell me, viewer, have you ever sat and pondered to yourself what game would be a pinnacle example of how to do customization? Well, I have, and that's why today we'll be discussing Sekiro. Oh, hold on, that can't be right. Let me double check here. Yeah, my contract says that I'm not allowed to talk about a game that isn't Square Enix's The World Ends With You, unless it's a game somehow directly tied to The World Ends With You. Sekiro is, not that, so I think this one's out of my range. Well, I guess that's about all I can do. Sorry to cut this one short, but it looks like we're called... where? That was my window. Who are you?
I'm Domo.
What does that mean?
It means I'm Domo. Look, you gotta talk about Sekiro, bro. It's so good.
Look, I don't know how good you can hear out there, but I have a contract.
Nope, too bad. I need a Sekiro video on this channel now.
Well, I'm not gonna, and last time I checked, the aliens hadn't returned Carson from space yet, so it's not happening.
Alright, fine. I'll do it then.
You? No way. And fix my window first.
Sorry, I can't hear you over the transition.
Hold on.
Welcome to BlackJupiter. My name's Domo, and dear viewer, I have a question for you. What makes a game fun? Everyone has their own answer to this question, since people like different types of games and different genres, so there's really no one defined answer. I don't speak for everyone, but I do think I know one part of games that a lot of people like, which is the ability to customize and have options within a game. Take a peek into any sort of game fan base, and you'll see people sharing what armor sets they are rocking for the best skills, what weapons they like to use, what skills they put on their character, and many more examples of people interacting and talking about how they customize their game experience. For many people, games are partially fun due to the freedom of choice they have in how they approach the game. But is it possible for a game to be fun despite having almost no options? Well, I know a game that has done the impossible and achieved that magnificent feat. But before we can continue, let's define what options are in my definition. I define options as the multiple ways a player can approach a challenge, with more options resulting in more ways to beat a challenge. These can be obvious things such as weapons, skills, items, anything and everything that can be used to tackle a challenge, such as a boss, differently. A lot of people, including me, naturally think that more options means more fun, which is usually true. Simply having the ability to do what you want in a game is more fun, and creates a customized experience for the player. A lot of game developers take this information to heart, including From Software. For those unaware, From Software is a game developer known for their brutally hard RPGs such as Dark Souls and Elden Ring, which also have crazy amounts of customizability. Many of their games are critical successes and have spawned loyal fanbases who devote time to solving crazy lore and doing absurd challenges, and this applies to the 2019 title, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro is set in the Sengoku period of Japan, but now filled with mythological beasts and people who for some reason can wield lightning. And like its other From Software brothers, is known for its crushing difficulty and crazy boss fights. With the usual From Software formula paved, we can assume that Sekiro has a crazy amount of options that allow players to learn to defeat bosses in their own way, right? Nope. Sekiro has severely limited options. Now I know what you're about to say. Bro, what do you mean this game is cheeks? It's balls, you're coping! But that's simply untrue. From Software has created a game that thrives off its lack of options and creates a crazy gameplay experience. Obviously liked by many people, but how does it do this? Before we can answer that, we need to understand how Sekiro's amount of options stack up against other games, and how these options are limited. When I say Sekiro has limited options, how limited are we talking here? Well, unlike many games, Sekiro does not give you many things to customize or change. The main things that can be changed are your combat arts, your prosthetics, and your items used. Compare this to another From Software property, Elden Ring, which has crazy amounts of options. Elden Ring lets you change your weapon skills, your armor, your spells, and many other things to make your game experience easier. However, both games do feature the ability to level up. With this in mind, shouldn't grinding stats to boost your character be a viable strategy in both Sekiro and Elden Ring? Well, Sekiro's level ups don't increase stats at all. The only way to increase your offense is by beating bosses and gaining memories that allow players to deal more damage. Level ups in Sekiro only give skill points, which are used to get new skills and combat arts. This does sound like an option, and technically is, but the issue here is that these skills virtually do nothing against bosses. They are mainly for groups of enemies and increasing your own abilities like healing, which is not factoring in giving you any option against bosses. This shows that even leveling up is limited. Naturally, a game like Elden Ring already seems more fun, but even further things are stacked against Sekiro. Options are able to make bosses easier and provide fun solutions for a player. Instead of having to brute force a boss, a player can make the bosses easier by using their options to find a unique solution. Let me draw you a graph to represent what I mean. The circle on the graph is a representation of how you'll beat the boss or what you can use against the boss. The red represents core gameplay, basically the standard game combat. Stuff like dodging, basic attacks, the works. The green represents your options, which are used to make bosses easier and more fun to fight. Drawing this with Elden Ring and using Margit as the example, it can be seen that there is a much higher reliance on using your options. Elden Ring gives you summons which can take aggro away from you and deal damage to the boss, different weapons with unique skills, and armor to reduce damage taken from the enemy. All of these things can be gotten by exploring the world and fighting enemies, and all of these options let players have a customized experience against a boss, one where they can switch what they are using to achieve victory under their own means. Sekiro's example used the early game boss of Genichiro, and as you can see your options do barely anything against him. As said before, Sekiro's main options are your prosthetics, combat arts, and items, and not all of these are the most useful for boss encounters. The most useful option is your prosthetics, which lets you achieve a variety of effects such as instantly blocking an attack, dealing massive damage, staggering the enemy, etc. These sound pretty busted, but are severely limited by spirit emblems. Spirit emblems are the currency to use these prosthetics, and you gain more through exploring in the game, eventually hitting a cap of 20. This amount can be further increased using the Ceremonial Tanto, which makes the player lose a percentage of health for 5 extra spirit emblems. At the point in the game the player faces Genichiro, the player will not have 20 spirit emblems, and most likely will not have found the Ceremonial Tanto. This means that the prosthetic uses are extremely limited, especially with many prosthetics using 2 to 3 emblems per use. Therefore, it is not an option players can reliably lean on to help in tough situations, as they can run out of emblems very easily. Later in the game when the player has 20 emblems and the Tanto, prosthetic uses are still limited as they will run out of emblems quickly, and using the Tanto is super risky as it cuts your health and locks you into an animation, which isn't good against fast late game bosses. Combat arts are next and are mostly good on enemies, but not bosses. Combat arts are mainly good for crowd control and closing distance, which are good in most scenarios. But in boss fights, combat arts lock you into animations where bosses will simply tank the hit and hit you after, which will put you in a super disadvantaged position. The one way to fix this issue is to of course wait for an opening on the boss, which you can do, but these openings can be short and some arts have very long animations. The combat art to beat all combat arts is the Mortal Draw, which causes enemies and bosses to block and take damage. This uses spirit emblems but can be used without them, but its biggest flaw remains its long wind-up animation, meaning you need a long enough opening and precise timing to make it useful. Another great combat art to use against bosses is the Ichimonji Double, which lets you build up posture damage very quickly, but like the Mortal Draw, it has a very slow startup time and leaves you open afterwards. Next is items, which are the least risky to use. There are candy items which can increase your offense, health, defense, and have short animations to use. Of course, the issue here is that they are limited in amount and last for a short amount of time, which means like the other options, a player cannot use these to fall back on when in a tough scenario, as they are limited and still have an animation attached to them. From what I'm saying here, it's easy to imagine that Sekiro is an unfair mess of a game that sounds incredibly tedious because of the lack of player control in the fight, but this does not reflect the critical praise the game has gained. So what does Sekiro do right? What Sekiro does so great is in its core gameplay. The game isn't built on what weapons you can find or what skills you can get, it's based on you learning the core gameplay inside and out and studying the bosses. What Sekiro's core gameplay does that makes it feel so addictive is that it keeps you on a constant offense in everything you do. Sekiro's core gameplay loop has you attacking and blocking, which seems fairly normal for a game. Where this is turned on its head, however, is when Sekiro introduces the parry mechanic, which is called deflecting in the game, and how that lets the player become the boss of the game. See, Sekiro runs off health bars and posture bars, with you reducing health to 0 being a kill on an enemy, and you maxing out a posture bar also being a kill on an enemy. Posture kills are the main way fights will go, since they are faster to max out than reducing an enemy's health. The only downside is that posture bars reduce over time, but this decrease can be alleviated by dealing damage, which makes them decrease less the more damage you do. Your player character, Wolf, also has his own posture and health bar you must keep track of. Unlike the enemy, a posture break on Wolf is not an instant kill, instead stunning him for a small period. Attacking, on both the player and enemy side, will fill the posture bar. But what about blocking? Blocking, not parrying, will not fill the enemy's posture bar, instead filling yours and eventually breaking yours. Of course, this still prevents damage, but your bar fills up, and you must let it recover. This seems to put this into a normal game rhythm, with having times of both offense and defense. But the parry changes all of this. Parrying, which is timing a block as soon as an enemy attack is about to hit and is shown by an orange flash and sparks, fills the enemy's posture bar, and also fills yours, but does not allow it to completely fill. This makes the parry the ultimate defense and offense, letting you fill the enemy's posture bar and not allowing yours to break. This single mechanic, in my opinion, is what makes up for the lack of options in Sekiro, and replaces many options in making bosses more manageable. This allows players to constantly be on offense and dominate the battle, always dealing some sort of damage to the opponent and not letting the player take any damage. Battles are built around this parry, with enemies having long and fast combo chains. In normal games, this would be seen as a purely defensive period, and some people might complain there's not enough time to get an attack and the battle drags. In Sekiro though, the parry makes these long and fast combos into opportunities to deal massive posture damage, letting the player overcome the massive advantages the bosses have, while attacking and prosthetic tools can help make these bosses easier. Every single boss aside from a small few can be done by only parrying. This allows fast-paced gameplay where the player does not feel overwhelmed or in danger. In a way, they are the danger. Most FromSoft games, from what I've played and seen, give importance to dying so that you can learn enemy patterns. This is of course very important in Sekiro, as you can only start knowing attack timings once you've died to a boss a couple times. This is where Sekiro's mechanic of revival comes in, and also acts as a way to make bosses much more manageable. Like most FromSoft games, bosses deal massive damage and will kill you in seconds. And Revival gives you a second chance to learn their patterns and adapt faster. Revival also in a way acts as a sort of option, as it gives you more life and more chances to beat the boss, technically making fights easier, but the player does not need to revive. Sekiro understands you will be dying a lot since you need to see bosses' attacks and learn when to parry, and specifically gives you the revival option to ease the pain of this process. These two options, parrying and reviving, give the player all the options they need to defeat the challenges presented in the game. Sekiro is so strong with the options because its core gameplay excels by itself. All that you need is patience and the ability to adapt to master the game. As a later boss tells you, hesitation is defeat, and the game teaches you and expects you to stay on the offensive and defeat these bosses through sheer skill and perseverance. Sekiro has some of the strongest gameplay that I've ever experienced. The feeling of getting into the flow of parrying and attacking was an experience unlike anything else. Sekiro is a masterclass in combat design, and I hope one day FromSoft makes another game just like it, with a focus on becoming better at its fundamental mechanics and becoming a master of them. How do you guys feel about Sekiro and other games like it with a focus on core mechanics over options? Let me know in the comments. And you know what else has really in-depth mechanics or are masterpieces in their own right? Our patrons. Special thanks to Bacon King, Kaiser, and Nero Jacob Kuratama.